Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of GameHammer Daily. Now yesterday Aladdin, the live action version, came out and decided that it would be the perfect opportunity to discuss a classic game. But which one is the classic and which ones are almost classics? There are three different versions of Aladdin, the 16-bit version, the 16-bit version and the 8-bit version. And which one's better? We'll find out. We're going to start with the one that most of us in the UK would remember. It's the 16-bit Mega Drive version from Virgin Games. Let's get straight into it. When work began on a Mega Drive version of Aladdin in January 1993, and the release date was set for October the same year, meaning that the game had to be finished in September to get the cartridges made in time, there was really only one choice to get this game out, especially when a massive amount of that production time was taken up with just creating the digitized animations using Disney's own animators. 8 months isn't a massive amount of time to create a game, but when the animations were ready, that time limit was more like 3 months. Who could pull off such a feat? Enter Virgin Games. Back in the early 90s, Virgin Games were pumping out some amazing titles for the Mega Drive, including several of my absolute favourite games on the system. Corporation, one of the first 3D first-person games that I'd ever played, and a game which has left a lasting impression on me ever since, and Earthworm Jim, a game I really must cover on this show at some point. Even before Virgin were making my favourite Mega Drive games, they were pumping out classics on my beloved Amstrad CPC. You may remember Monty Python's Flying Circus. I know I do. I played that game so much during my 8-bit years. And you'll certainly remember Sorcery Plus, which we've reviewed on the main GameHammer show a while back. Sorcery Plus was created by the founders of Virgin Games, the Gang of Five, and you can't get much better a pedigree than that. Moreover, Virgin had a pretty close relationship with Sega's products at this time, having bought out Mastertronic, the distributors of Sega's Master System console in the UK and eventual founder of Sega Europe, so it's safe to say that if anyone could get the best out of the Mega Drive in such a short time, it was a bunch of coders with an exceptional track record and close ties to the hardware. Aladdin on the Mega Drive is a colourful, well-animated platformer with controls that are fluid and easy to get to grips with. It looks great, it sounds great, and it plays great. I put it in my best film tie-in games video a few years back for good reason. You play as Aladdin, except for the bonus games where you play as his monkey sidekick Abu, and you are tasked with performing some simple tasks on each level while making your way to the far side of what is essentially an obstacle course full of enemies. You can dispatch your enemies in several ways, my favourite being attacking them with a sword if they're at close range, or pelting them with apples if they're further away, but I have to mention that the variety of enemies is pretty low in this game, and you'll get rather sick of seeing the same ones again and again if you play it long enough, but the levels are varied and that does keep the game interesting. The soundtrack is brilliant too, taking a lot of inspiration from the film as you would expect, and helping to build the atmosphere of the game. If there's one downside to this game, it's that the bosses aren't very inspiring. I'm writing this review just after replaying the game, and I'm having trouble thinking of a single boss that I saw in it. They just don't stand out, but don't let that put you off. The game is well worth your time. Track it down and give it a go. It's a classic for a very good reason. Okay, this version is brilliant. It's an absolute classic, possibly the best film tie-in on the Mega Drive, one of the best platformers on the Mega Drive, and that is saying something because the Mega Drive has some great platformers. The animation is superb, the music is fantastic, it looks great, it plays great. It could have done with a few more substantial bosses. The bosses kind of let the game down a bit, but the rest of it is so good that you won't mind. It is a great game. I recommend, if you haven't played it, go and play it right now. It is brilliant. But it's not the only 16-bit version. As I said at the start, there are two 16-bit versions and an 8-bit version. So let's have a look at the Mega Drive's main contender, the Super Nintendo, because it had a different version. Let's take a look at it. If I mention platform games on the Super Nintendo, you're instantly going to think of Super Mario World. It's just natural. If I mention third-party platformers rather than Nintendo's own roster, most of you are going to start talking about Mega Man. This Capcom icon was a big player on the original NES, so it's only natural that when the time came to bring Aladdin to the Super Nintendo, Capcom got the call. This game plays very differently to its Mega Drive counterpart, but the differences don't stop there. Gone are the Disney animations. Those ones are all Capcom's own. Gone is the limited reference to the film. Capcom's version follows the story far more closely and does a far better job of telling that story during the intermissions between levels than the Virgin Games version. The music being based on the film is retained, however, and it sounds brilliant on the SNES's SSMP chip. Aladdin on the Super Nintendo feels like a cross between Prince of Persia and Mario. To start with, you have no short-range attack. Aladdin is swordless in the Nintendo game. But you still have the apples. This time, apples stun your opponents, so you best get ready to jump on their heads Mario style once they're stunned, and you'll have to move quickly, because throwing fruit just doesn't knock out an enemy the way that you'd hope it does. Each level is varied, and you'll have to replay a few of them a few times just to memorise the enemy positions, because some of these guys are stood exactly where you don't want them to be. The enemies are just as lacking in variety in this SNES version as they were on the Mega Drive, but at least the bosses have some more personality to them. In typical Capcom style, the bosses have a set pattern to them, and once you've worked that out, they're pretty simple to deal with, but that's the point. The challenge is in deciphering the patterns, and not beating the enemy itself. All in all, I can't fault this game. It plays in its own way, and it's in no way a port of the Mega Drive version, which means it's a breath of fresh air for these comparison episodes. I like it. It has its own feel to it, and which one you prefer, Mega Drive or SNES, will depend on the kind of gamer you are, which is pretty cool. Pick the version that you enjoy the most, and go with it, cause you'll have a great time. Now, as you can imagine, the Super Nintendo game is brilliant. It's Capcom, and it's Capcom from an era where they really knew how to make platformers. This is an exceptional platformer. It's very different to the Mega Drive version. I think, to be honest with you, it does follow the film a little bit more accurately in terms of its inter-level intermissions. I would say cutscenes, but they're not. They're just intermissions. And it's a very different style of gameplay in the levels. It's a standard platformer. You've got a long-range attack that stuns enemies. You've got to jump on their heads to actually kill them. And that's how it works. It's an interesting way of doing it. He doesn't use a sword at all. This is the era of Nintendo that was very much family-oriented, family-friendly. You couldn't show death. You couldn't show swear words, things like that. So it's a very different game. It feels different. It plays different. It's a much more straightforward platformer affair. Let's put it that way. It's not an action-oriented thing. It's standard platformer. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It's actually very good. And I think it actually does the bosses far better than the Mega Drive version did. The bosses have a bit more to them. They have a bit more personality. The animation's not as good. It's not done by Disney's animators. You can tell it's done by Capcom's animators. But the bosses themselves, once you've got their patterns, they're pretty easy. But before you get their pattern, it is a challenge. And that's what I like. So it is a different experience. It's not a bad experience. It's a good experience. It's just different to the Mega Drive version. Which is better? I think it's going to come down to personal preference. Do you like the ability to use long and short range attacks? Go for the Mega Drive version. Do you want something that feels an awful lot more like Prince of Persia meets Mario Brothers? That's what I was feeling when I was playing this. Then go for the Super Nintendo version. They're really both very good, and which you prefer is going to be based on your personal preferences. So that's the 16-bit versions, but there is another one, and it's the one that often people overlook. Let's have a look at the 8-bit Master System version. Also on the Game Gear, but we're going to look at the Master System version because it'll give you a bigger view on the screen. Let's have a look at that one. In 1992, Sims landed on the Master System in style, bringing Ninja Gaiden to the system and receiving critical acclaim for their efforts. They followed this up in 1993 with Vampire Master of Darkness, a Castlevania clone that was also very well received. So it should come as no surprise that when it came time to make a version of Aladdin for the Master System, Sega turned to Sims to ensure the game was a success. And it was. The game received rave reviews. It was even named as 1994's Best Game Gear Game by GamePro magazine, who said it featured gorgeous background graphics and detailed, quick-moving sprites. To be fair, they're not wrong. The problem is, the graphics and the sound are all this game has going for it. When I tried this game, I was immediately taken aback by how nice it looked. It really is gorgeous. I also really enjoyed the music. It's lovely. Then I tried playing it. There is no game here. The first level is just a case of running to the right and attempting to avoid the obstacles that appear on the screen at the last second. You need expert timing and to have memorized the patterns if you're going to get past this level. The next level is the same. On the third level, you get some basic platforming, but even then, you have to memorise the patterns of the obstacles that appear out of nowhere. At no point does this game feel like a proper game. It feels rushed, it feels severely lacking in atmosphere, and it has hardly anything to do with the Aladdin film. Sims had a great pedigree up to this point. They had produced some excellent games. Aladdin is not one of them. It's basic, it's repetitive, and it's boring. The Master System is capable of far more than this, and I'm disappointed that we have to wrap this up on such a poor contender. Avoid this one unless you really must play all three of these games. The 16-bit versions are both superior in almost every way. So there we have it, the Master System version, also the Game Gear version, although it's a smaller screen in the Game Gear version, let's put it that way. It's not a good game, I'm sorry. I know a few people say it's good for what it is, but it's not. The level design is basically Back to the Future 3's first level, or Kane from the Amstrad CPC, where you have very little time to dodge all these things that just come out flying at you across the screen. It's not good. There is no gameplay there. It's just rote memorization of where the obstacles are so that you can dodge them. It's not a good game. It looks nice, the sound's nice, the graphics are very well done. Animation-wise, it's not bad for an 8-bit, but that is all I can say about it in terms of good. The levels are just bland, there's nothing to it. The cutscenes that they have are unskippable, and it just slows the game down. The whole thing is, it feels like it's been rushed together with a game engine from something else, and it's just had the Aladdin license tacked on. It's not very good, I don't like it, I don't recommend it. If you want to play one of the good Aladdin games, get the Mega Drive or the Super Nintendo, avoid this one. Sorry guys, that's just how it is. So anyway, a 2 out of 3 is not bad, is it? It's pretty good. So, I hope you've enjoyed this anyway, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you did like this, and if you did, remember to click the like button, share it with your friends so that they'll know a good game when they see it, and do subscribe for future videos, because there will be more in the future. But until next time, I've been Zoe Kirk-Robinson, you've been watching GameHammer Dailies, and I'll see you tomorrow. If you liked today's video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you.